Good morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. I have a very special guest today, and I know I say that every single time we have a podcast, but that's because I'm very lucky to have a really wonderful guest. And today my guest is Cera Turner. Cera is the CEO of a company called CeraThrive, CeraThrive. And hey, Cera, good morning and welcome. And tell us, how did you come up with that name?
Good morning, Michele. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on your fabulous show.
Thank you.
Yes, it's the company is a brain device. So really, we're about brain optimization. So when I started the company, of course, I had all different things to do with light because we're using light as the main modality. But a lot of those things were taken, like Lux and Helios and everything you can think of. But my name is Cera, and so I thought, right, let's just call it CeraThrive. But actually, it fits quite well because Cera is also like cerebral, cerebella.
Right.
It's a brain device. So it's just a little bit of a nod, a little bit of a cheeky name that kind of matches my name, but also kind of highlights that we're really focusing on the brain.
Well, we have so much to talk about today because you are doing something that no one else is doing. And I think people should know that. Sorry, I have a little bit of a leftover cold from traveling, but you're doing something that is so unique, which I don't know how you ever came up with this, but the gut-brain microbiome and the vagus nerve connecting the gut and the brain have become some of the biggest research topics and just consumer topics over the last few years. So you hit a nerve at the right time. And so tell us more about the product and how it works with the connection for what's called photobiomodulation, which is red light therapy in this case, between the gut and the brain.
For sure. Yes, it is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Photobiomodulation.
Yes.
Maybe I'll just kind of describe that word so that, it's not overwhelming for people. Really, it's photo as in light, bio as in biology, and then to change something, to modulate something. So
Right.
really, this is a science. It's actually an ancient science, but now it's kind of having a modern take with, the advent of LEDs and things. But it's really just about using light as a therapy. So photobiomodulation covers a wide range of light therapies. And the one that I'm interested in and that's particularly involved in healing is red light therapy. So people may have heard of red light therapy before. So this is using light wavelengths within the red and slightly above red because our eyes can only see a certain amount of the wavelengths that we have. We can only see the visible spectrum like the rainbow. But actually, there are light wavelengths that are a little bit above and below those. So below is UV light, and I'm sure people are very familiar with kind of UV light, and that's potentially can be damaging if you're exposed to UV light, like, if you're kind of out in the sun too long, because it's a very short wave light. And at the other end of the spectrum, there's near infrared, which is a longer wave. And actually, our bodies are very transparent to these long wavelengths of light.
Mm-hmm.
Near infrared light will go straight through your body. A lot of people, because I talk a lot about the brain, a lot of people think, well, isn't it kind of dark in there, like inside the skull?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, these longer wavelengths of light will penetrate straight through the bone and actually get onto the surface of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing is utilizing these longer wavelengths of light for a therapeutic purpose. And in this case, we're looking particularly at the gut and the brain together because it's very difficult to separate those two organs. They're kind of in our bodies, they're totally working together all the time. The gut and the brain are talking to each other. There's a biodirectional communication. Actually, the gut, there are more messages going from the gut to the brain than the other way around, which is hugely interesting because it just goes to show that a lot of what we're thinking or how our brains are processing information, that information is coming from the gut.
Mm-hmm. Well, that serotonin is 80% in the gut, right? And one of the feel-good hormones, right? So
yeah, a lot of neurotransmitters are made in the gut, and we have a lot of neural tissue in the gut. We have a whole innovation, the vagus nerve, that innervates the gut and that has a direct communication to the brain. So yes, the gut, They call the gut the second brain. I would maybe call it the first brain, but definitely it does act like a brain. The microbiome, we have a lot of bacteria. In fact, we're more bacteria than human cells, which is another very interesting thing. But
Right.
bacteria are also sending signals to our brain, our gut bacteria.
Sarah, why do you think it took so long for the connection to occur? That this is really very recent, and
Yeah.
yet this is truly ancient in terms of the connectivity, but it didn't get really discussed until now. So why do you think it took so long?
I think that we're living in a science paradigm that has been predominantly dominated by uh, chemistry. We've kind of focused a lot of our research on neurotransmitters and drug interactions, how things affect our body. I think we were focusing on the human part. We weren't so much focusing on bacteria. I think in science, we kind of started to think of that as, oh yeah, we just have these bacteria in our gut, they're probably doing something with food. We weren't really focusing on that interaction between bacteria and ourselves. So I
Mhm.
think it has taken a long time to get here. I think now people are, even when we're starting to do research into like plants, how do plants interact with the bacteria in the soil? We've got some fabulous things about um, fungus in the soil and how that's directly interacting with plants. So I think it's kind of a knowledge that's, like you say, it's an ancient knowledge, but maybe because potentially during the wars we had such a need for drugs and quick solutions, we kind of went off on that tangent.
Mhm.
From a science paradigm, we're very much in what I would call a drug paradigm right now. Understanding this more holistic way of thinking, um, I think now we probably just have more efficient ways to measure things. People are looking more holistically. There's more scope for interdisciplinary research because people can now have a lot more research available where maybe somebody from chemistry is looking at something from biology. So I think really that's why now it's coming to the fore and we're really beginning to understand the importance of things like the microbiome and the gut-brain connection.
And also, in the beginning, it was first preventative medicine and alternative medicine, and all
Oh,
this was basically in functional medicine, and more and more now people are calling it complementary medicine because if you can take the best of allopathic and the best of functional medicine and find solutions that way without relying only on pharmaceutical solutions, which is basically drugs. So, how do you feel about that, and how does that play into what you do with CeraThrive?
yes. Well, of course, I think there is a place for everything. There's definitely a place for pharmaceuticals. I'm not a big pharma basher when it comes to acute illness.
Great.
If something happens, if somebody was to get knocked down in the street, you're not going to kind of look for something holistic to do. You're going to want them in the ambulance and you only give them the drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've got huge advancements in pharmaceutical medicine, which is brilliant. And we really do not want to kind of dismiss that. But on the other side of the coin, I think a lot of people are not suffering from acute illnesses. They're suffering from chronic long-term conditions that have come about maybe by not being exposed to a more natural environment. And by that, I mean just, what humans are designed to do, standing on the ground, looking at the sun, you know, not being under artificial light, interacting as communities. So I think there is now becoming, certainly in the Western world, a need to look at more therapeutic techniques that are holistic and focus more on what our bodies are meant to be doing. Because although we lead these very modern indoor lifestyles now, our bodies are still designed for a more outdoor lifestyle. So I think there is a place for both. I just think we maybe need to focus a little bit more on these more, maybe you would call them alternative medicines for chronic long-term conditions and leave maybe the pharmaceutical approach to the more acute conditions where, there's some kind of emergency.
European Wellness, founded by the iconic and widely published Professor Dr. Michael Chan, is the world leader in stem cell and peptide therapy, with 26 medical and aesthetic spa locations primarily in Europe and Asia. Their website, www.europeanwellness.com, details the wide range of wellness products that can be ordered using the Ageless code for a 10% discount. They will also offer our viewers discounts on medical and cosmetic services and products if they choose to visit the clinics. I have firsthand experience using their wide range of science-based stem cell and peptide products and am now a loyal customer. Go to their website, www.europeanwellness.com, for more information about this exciting company. No, that's so well said, Cera. And I think it really encapsulates what can be controversial and conflicting and adversarial in some cases, but yet it really should be complementary. And I think you've just described it perfectly. So let's go back to the beginning about you and how did you journey to the place where you are today?
So yes, I actually started my career in very orthodox scientific study, and I worked for drug companies for a long time, looking at drug delivery. So how we actually deliver drugs to people. More specifically, I was looking at inhaled drugs. And during my time, looking at the delivery of inhaled drugs, I began to understand that a lot of the times when you see differences in how people respond to drugs, it's not the drug, it's the person. So somebody who leads an outdoor lifestyle or somebody who kind of has a lot of community can respond very differently to a drug, than somebody who's doing something different. So that led me to understand that really, if we want to get the best out of, for example, these remedies, we need to start with the person. And I started looking at nutritional medicine. Very interesting, but again, doesn't quite get you there unless you're looking holistically. I started to look at psychology. I did clinical neuroscience. During all those times, I began to understand that actually there are so many things we can do to help ourselves to prevent illness, and to get ourselves in a good position so that if we do need to take some kind of pharmaceutical, we're better able to absorb it and actually get what we need from it. And some of those things were very simple. From a point of view of inhalers, for example, asthma drugs, if you're grounded and you don't have static charge in your body, the drug is going to go to a different place in your lungs. So you need less drug if you are somebody who's outside grounding and maybe in natural light than somebody who's maybe stuck indoors and is building up static in their body.
And very toxic.
Yeah. So that was my trajectory to lead me to look at how can I bring in something that mimics nature more, mimics that natural life more, but maybe is available for people who are compromised for whatever reason, because as much as we'd all love to kind of be outside all day, that's not our reality, right? All of us we have our comfortable homes, we have our computers, we have our work. So what I've come to believe is, as much as possible, we need to live a natural life, but we need to have ways to enable us to do that within our modern society. So
would you take a second and just define grounding for people? Some people don't know what that is.
Yeah, grounding is, or maybe earthing is sometimes a term. It's really just about standing barefoot on the ground. That's why it's grounding. It's a very simple word, or you can hold on to a tree or you can do anything. But what we're doing from a scientific point of view is we're allowing electrons, which is charged particles, to come up through the ground and to stabilize our own charge in our body. Because actually our bodies are electric. Like, we kind of all the neural transmissions we have, that's actually kind of an electrical pathway. So you can kind of see it almost like, any kind of electrical item you might have in your house. Normally you have to have some way of grounding it, of removing any static. And it's the same for people. There is a very scientific principle behind just standing barefoot on the ground. As kind of crazy as that seems, people maybe dismiss it as something so simple. But actually, our bodies respond very differently depending on whether we have a buildup of charge in our body or whether we're able to dissipate that charge by standing on the earth or standing on the ground. So sometimes it's called earthing. And there's a brilliant book, actually, that I'd recommend to people called Earthing. Also call it grounding. It's the same thing.
One of my guests way back when was Justin Franson, who has been doing a lot of research. Are you familiar with him in Southern Cal?
No.
Uh, yeah, he was on the same movie with the Biohack Yourself movie that you were on. So I was really surprised when I was watching the Lollies movie and I saw you. Not
Oh,
surprised that I saw you, but surprised that I saw Justin there because I didn't know that they had gone into that direction. But he has a grounding bag that I actually put under my mattress and sleep with all the time. But in England, it's really difficult. Let's just say using England. We're in California today, both of us, but we know that we get a lot of sunshine here. Although today in San Francisco it's cloudy and cold. So how would you get outside and be grounding even if the sun is not out? Can you do it? Is it you
oh
just
yeah.
it's just the electromagnetic frequency of the earth, right?
You can normally, I mean, even in these cold places, you can stand on the ground for a minute. You really don't need long. And if it's kind of snow on the ground and you don't want to get out there, you just need to kind of be connected to something that is grounded. You know,
Yeah.
tree hugging is kind of like a synonym for like kind of a hippie thing. But
Yeah.
actually, it's true. A tree is very grounded and you can ground, just by holding onto the trunk of a tree. So there's no excuse really, no matter where you live, for not kind of touching nature or kind of being outside and dissipating your charge once a day. It's such an easy thing. And in most countries, you can put your feet on the ground. And in fact, there's a lot of benefits to cold. We now know humans have become a little bit too comfortable. We kind of don't want to be too cold. We don't want to be too hot, but that's not how our ancestors lived. And that's not how our biology is designed. So, a little bit of discomfort standing with your bare feet on the ground, it's not going to do you any harm.
That's very good advice. So you're saying do it first thing in the morning, hopefully if the sun is out, because if you do it at sunrise or early in the day, you're getting that solar light as well, right? So the combination of the two is actually more compelling than if it's cloudy and you're just doing it with the earth, right? So
For sure. And even if it's cloudy, I mean, I'm looking out, I'm also not far from you at the moment. I'm down in Santa Cruz. It's a
yeah.
little bit
Oh.
grey. It's a little
Oh.
bit grey today, but actually you're still getting those long wavelengths. They still penetrate through the clouds. So even if you can't see the sun, you're still getting that near
Oh,
infrared.
okay, that's good to know. So going back to your journey, so who were the people that influenced you the most during your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, I have a number of scientists that I would give a shout out to who influenced me. One is a fabulous lady called Dr. Mei Wan Ho, who wrote some really interesting books that were totally ahead of their time on water, actually, and how light and various things in the environment can change the structure of water. And that blew my mind totally because in all of my different training, I'd never really heard of that.
Hmm.
And also there was a neuroscientist, a neurosurgeon, Dr. Jack Cruz, who also put out some very interesting information around about the time that the biohacking movement was all getting started. And to this day, I also still, make sure that I follow up on his blogs and his posts because I think probably he was the first one who really started talking about circadian biology and how we should respond to this solar energy, as you put it.
Hmm.
But there's a number, also Jerry Pollock, who's a fabulous scientist who also wrote about water. He wrote a book called Fourth Phase of Water. These are
Yeah.
scientists who are kind of working sometimes a little bit thanklessly to kind
Hmm.
of change the paradigm with regards to how we think about biology and how it is actually working. That's a little bit different from our orthodox way of thinking, which is very heavily influenced by chemistry.
Hmm. And what about your family? Was there anyone in particular in your family that uh, spurred you to become a scientist?
That's an interesting question. Do you know, I don't know. My family all I come from like a little town in England. There wasn't much about science, but my dad did always used to read the Sherlock Holmes stories to me, and that's kind of about investigating and kind of observation rather than taking things for granted. So sometimes I think a little bit of that seeped into me throughout my career because I do tend to follow those principles of direct observation as a science rather than just doing what you think you should do because you read it in a book. Because
Right.
this stuff is counterintuitive, and yet if you go outside, you can feel it. So I do think there is a little bit of science where we've lost a little bit of that kind of inquiring mind and acting from your own observations rather than what somebody's telling you should be thinking or feeling.
And I think you told me that your mother was a vegetarian. So how did that influence you in terms of your path?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yes, my mum was a vegetarian back when that also wasn't trendy. So we used to have to get on the train, go to Neil's yard. They had the sacks of beans and lentils. So I think, yes, that certainly from an early age, I kind of understood how you should kind of make an effort to do what you think is the right thing to do. And certainly then I was exposed to different ways of thinking about health. And she's a vegetarian to this day, very, very healthy. I was on the phone to her this morning. She's been paddleboarding. She's in her
Oh,
70s.
wow.
So in England in the cold. So
Right.
she certainly lives it. So I think yes, probably that is a good example of kind of having that ability to kind of think a little bit out of the box.
Did she give you a lot of resistance when you went into the drug industry early on?
She's very supportive of anything that I do, actually.
Oh, good.
But I think she now prefers this kind of what I'm doing now because it kind of is much more in line with her own philosophy. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I noticed in your background is it's so multidisciplinary.
Mhm.
So explain that. How did you make all these transitions and make them all integrate and work together to where you are today?
Yeah, well, my kind of backbone is always biology, but actually, when you start to look at things like light, you have to bring in physics. There's no way around it. Light has physical properties. So I think then I had to kind of go down the route of looking at physics. And of course, when you get to physics, there are limitations. You have to look at quantum physics. So I think having an interdisciplinary kind of way of thinking is the only way now to kind of absorb all this information. And as I said, I think that's becoming more and more easy to do as we get more technology. We now have large language models that allow us to gather huge amounts of information. People are starting to bring in like physics, chemistry, biology into a kind of one learning so that you can get that broad approach. But I've been very fortunate in that I was able to be in very orthodox science and then kind of make a swing into actually what I would call fairly woo-woo, looking at things like, does our intention influence what we're doing in experiments?
Mhm.
And now I'm kind of in a middle ground because light is actually very, very scientific. We have a lot of data, but also it's still fairly esoteric. We still
Mhm.
don't exactly know what light is. We can
Mhm.
put something on the electromagnetic spectrum, but still science is yet to pin some of those things down. So I
Mhm.
feel very fortunate that I've been able to kind of, like you say, look at all different things and try to bring it together. And I think we thought that we knew a lot more in science, and now as we're starting to get more and more advanced technology, we're beginning to realize that maybe some of our assumptions weren't correct. And so there's now a very exciting time in science where people are starting to make new discoveries,
Mhm.
are enabling us to bring in all different kinds of learning. And a lot of it kind of goes back to ancient learning that we kind of, oh, maybe they were right in some of the things they were saying back then. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's a very interesting time in science.
So on your journey, what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
The biggest challenge, I think, is to still remain credible in science because we do live in a time where people want to be extremely evidence-based, which I get, that's important. But there isn't so much funding for some of this alternative medicine. And also, some of it, we don't quite have the right measuring tools for it. So there is a little bit of a resistance for things like light therapies where we're still pulling the evidence together. And so I think one of my challenges is to kind of remain a credible scientist, um, working in a field where we don't have a lot of scientific backing. So
Mhm.
just trying to keep pushing with the science, trying to make sure we're doing everything in a way which is more evidence-based. But definitely there's a lack of funding, there's a lack of understanding, and there's a little bit lack of the measurement tools that we need to
Mhm.
happen.
So in CeraThrive, why don't you take us on a deep dive and explain the product? I don't know, do you have a one with you right now that you
I've
can?
got I've got one down here I can get out in a second.
Okay, yeah, let's just talk first about the product, and then we can you can demo that or at least show it, show it what it looks like.
Exactly.
So, okay, so there are other companies, of course. There's like the plethora of companies doing red light therapy now, and some of them are bogus. We know that there's not a strong enough power to them to make a difference, and the others, of course, are more scientific, like Robert Weber's company. Robert Weber, and John Harper, and Julia Frost. All of them are going to be, like you, our podcast guest. So why don't you differentiate your product from, let's say, those three, because the Flex Beam and John's, what's it called,
Lumaflex.
Lumaflex, and then Robert's. Well, actually, I'm using Robert's watch, but I don't have the rest of his products. But why don't you just give us a tutorial on the differences between you and those competitors, since those are the ones I know of.
Yes, so they're all excellent red light therapy companies.
Oh, and LightStim too. We talked about LightStim. Yeah.
Some of them are very excellent red light therapy companies, but we all have a slightly different application. So my device is very much aimed at the gut-brain connection together, because I have found that if you want to have a good brain, you need to fix the gut. So I use two devices at the same time. Most of the devices you mentioned there are just single devices. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
So mine has something that you put on your head and something that you put on your gut.
Mm-hmm.
The other differentiator is that I have 4 different wavelengths in my headband. And the reason for that is because these different wavelengths of light are affecting different light receivers. So potentially you're getting different effects that are also synergistic. So, for example, I have visible red, but then I also have 3 wavelengths of near infrared light. So that's the light that's a little bit longer than red light. So I'm targeting the water in the brain, I'm targeting the mitochondria, which is where your cells make energy, and I'm potentially targeting like how your body makes collagen and elastin and supports the blood. So that's another difference there. I also have programs where I can what we call pulse the light, and that simply means like turning the light source off and on at a certain frequency per second, that you can actually have like a flashing light that also has an effect on brain function potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that the brain is, maybe people have heard of brain waves.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the brainwave frequency is different depending on what you're doing. If you're asleep, you have a very different brainwave than if you're awake and attending to something.
Mm-hmm.
So we can modulate that light signal in a way that entrains different brainwave frequencies. So my device has 6 different programs with 6 different brainwave frequencies that help the user to get into a certain brain state. So my device is photobiomodulation, which is what we've been talking about, light therapy, but also neuromodulation, which is pulsed light to change brainwave frequency. So that's another difference there. And I think the fact that my device, I think one of the reasons why people don't get as much use out of these devices is sometimes they're big, they're cumbersome, you don't know where to put them, you have to plug them in. My device is very small and battery operated because I want to remove any barriers to use.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another slight differentiation from some of those devices that can be quite big and a bit difficult to carry around. Maybe not the Lumaflex, that's very convenient, but the Lumaflex is not a brain device, that's more a pain device.
Mm-hmm. As is the Flex Beam.
As is Flex Beam, yeah, that's also
Right.
a pain device, yeah. The Weber helmet is also a brilliant device, but it is quite a big helmet. It's kind of like a bike helmet, and I don't think it's battery.
And the Weber is a medical device, and yours is not a medical device, correct?
None of the brain devices are medical devices, because at the moment there's no FDA classification for a brain device. And that's something that everybody in the industry, we're all working towards that. Because at the moment, the FDA, which is the regulatory body in the US that determines whether or not you're medical, it doesn't have a classification for brain health. And that's simply because there's not been significant clinical data that enables them to make that decision. But more so also, there has to be somebody within that organization who can review the data. But there is a bit of a barrier to getting that. like I say, all the companies, we're all working together to make that happen, but nobody can make a claim for brain health. We're all in the wellness category.
So in the brain, let's talk about that for just a moment. What are the areas of the brain that your red light does have an effect on, and why?
So what we know about red light is it enables you to go from a baseline to better. Because what you're doing with red light is you're stimulating how the body makes energy. So you're making a lot more energy available to the brain. And actually, if the brain is supplied with more energy, it's kind of capable of its own self-healing. So that's the first thing that you're doing. You're stimulating the production of ATP, the energy molecule.
Mm-hmm.
Also causing increased blood flow. Again, if you have increased blood flow, you have more oxygen going to the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have more waste products being removed. Now, again, that's very important for brain function. So just those three things alone, more oxygen, removal of waste, and more energy, is going
Mm-hmm.
to help people go from wherever they're at with their brain to better, more optimized.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically how it's working. And it's working in the same way as, like I say, a sunrise or sunset. This is the kind of stimulation that your brain gets from that near infrared light.
And does the red light affect mood, like anxiety and depression, like what would be with the amygdala, the fear aspect? Does it have an impact, a positive impact on that side of the brain, the
Well,
feeling side?
because we can't make any medical claims, we can't use words like anxiety or depression.
Uh,
I will say that things like, brain fog or kind of not being able to concentrate and memory are greatly enhanced. And
mm,
actually, from, those kinds of things, I actually also think that's hugely affected by the gut piece. Because
mm-hmm,
if you have metabolites, or if you have leaky gut, or if you have bacteria that are maybe detrimental, all of those are secreting things which kind of lead to those conditions that you're talking about, like
mm-hmm,
mood and brain fog, because you're getting those signals to the brain. So
mm-hmm,
actually, I think it's a combination of what's going on in your gut and your brain that lead to those kind of mood issues that you're talking about.
mm-hmm,
A lot of people, like using my device where they're specifically targeting the gut at the same time, tend to have better mood, better ability to deal with
mm-hmm.
stress. You know, I can't. Anxiety again is a bit of a medical term, but being able to deal with stressful situations is huge, because that's where a lot of our anxiety comes from.
And do you work with some of the microbiome companies to basically be compatible with, let's say, prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes and things are you doing any kind of alliances to kind of work together to integrate the program?
Yeah, I haven't done, but I recently was in Estonia and I met a fabulous lady who's got a company where she's looking at equating doing stool testing, doing microbiome testing, and then looking at having a program for exactly those symptoms you just mentioned. So we are just about to launch a study looking at that. And actually, in Australia, there is a research group there led by Dr. Anne Liebert, who has found that red light can change microbiome profiles. So this is, again, it's early stage research. Like you said earlier in the podcast, we're really only starting to look at the microbiome in earnest now. And
Mm-hmm.
there is some very promising data that shows that targeted red light to the gut can change the microbiome profile. And that's hugely important for neurodegeneration, because we now know that a lot of neurodegeneration potentially starts in the gut with disordered microbiome. So yes, we are currently just about to start a trial using testing microbiome before and after using the device. So I'll show you the two devices that we have. So this one is the gut panel, and you can see it's actually very simple technology, profound results with very simple tech. So this is just the red. You can see kind of the red there. I've got a filter on so you can't quite see.
Mm-hmm.
These ones here that you can see kind of glowing purpley, that's
Mm-hmm.
the near infrared.
And,
So
and what is, excuse me for interrupting, but tell us the difference between, again, I think you said it before, but I don't know if people really got it.
oh, I understand it is a bit complex. So red light is visible red that you can see with your eyes, and then just slightly longer wavelength. It kind of, our eyes can no longer see it, but it's it's there, and like I say, for this device, it looks like the it's glowing less bright. It's not, it's just our eyes can't pick it up. But it's
Hmm.
a long wave light. It's the light that you'd see at sunrise and sunset, and it does penetrate quite deep into the body, a few centimeters actually.
Mm.
So people may have heard of red light therapy masks, for beauty.
Of course.
They use red light because red light's skin deep, whereas near infrared will penetrate into the body. So if
Mm.
you want to have something that's affecting your tissues and your organs, you need to have that near infrared. So it's slightly longer wave than the red.
Hmm. And
So
then what about these companies that have the green and the blue
yeah.
and all the other different red alternatives to red light? What's the differentiation there? Why would you want that?
Well, we know that the sun contains all the different wavelengths of light.
Hmm.
And we as animals have evolved underneath the sun. So we're very sensitive to all different kinds of light, but the light is having a different effect. So green light is also very superficial. It's kind of only on the surface of the skin, but it's probably picked up with what we call opsins, which are small molecules that have a slightly different effect. But actually, we are starting to learn about green light that it can actually help with migraine. But because it's only skin deep, you have to put it through the eyes. It's not something that's going to get into the body or get onto the head. So companies are starting to look at maybe using green light through the eyes for migraine.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Again, it's interesting it took us so long to discover that light has this
Hmm.
profound effect. So we're really at early stages of finding out exactly which color, which equates to wavelength. When we talk about wavelength, we're really talking about color.
Hmm.
So which color is going to have which effect? But the red and the near infrared are definitely the ones that are the healing ones. It's what our body utilizes to switch on healing programs. So that's why most of these devices are red light devices
Well,
because
I have this company that I was at a show and I just picked up two little handhelds. One is a red light and one is a blue light, and they explained that the red light is what you just described and helps to stimulate collagen and elastin and so forth. So obviously, it's a beauty product in that regard. And then the blue light supposedly is for antibacterial and healing. Is that something that you would ever include in your future product line extensions to what you have today?
yes, it really depends what you're trying to do. A lot of the masks potentially might have blue light because acne, for example, can become infected if you get bacteria in
Yeah.
acne. So if you have blue light, because it's very short wave light as opposed to the long wave, because it's very short, it's very energetic. And it's so energetic, it can actually disturb the outside of a bacterial cell and destroy it.
Mm.
It's very interesting if you want to do anything where you're destroying bacteria, but it's superficial. It's not like you could put blue light through the gut and do anything with the gut bacteria because that's quite deep inside the body.
Mhm.
So at the moment, my focus is on the red because I'm all about taking someone from a baseline to better. I'm trying
Mhm.
to optimize, I'm trying to switch on those healing mechanisms. But I am interested in green because it's for migraines. I am interested in how we can really maximize our light. But we get enough blue light through our technology because
Well, that's exactly what I was just going to ask you because they say, "Oh, blue light, don't go near blue light, particularly right before you go to bed because that's all your screens." But yet, here's a device that I purchased that has blue light, and I'm using it on my face. So, am I doing the wrong? I mean, is that overlapping with the dangers of the blue light from the technology?
really the dangers of blue light and technology is that you're seeing it through your eyes and it's
Uh,
kind of making your body feel like it's the middle of the day because that's when we would see blue light.
uh,
So you really don't want to do it in the evening. But I'm imagining the device you've got, does it go kind of flush against your body?
exactly. It's got the little blue light sensors, and then you just put it right on your
Putting it
face.
on your skin. So you're just trying to be very specific with that blue light and to kill the bacteria. I
Mhm.
think the problem with blue light is that we just see it too much through our eyes.
Okay.
So really, we want to limit screen time so that
Okay.
or you can put filters on your screen. I have a filter on this screen that when the sun goes down, the blue light's taken out and the screen looks pink. There are little things you can do, But really, as a rule of thumb, we don't want to be seeing too much blue light outside of the middle of the day, if possible.
So I don't want to get too technical, but I want you to differentiate the gamma and the alpha, and the strength of your product is one of its big distinctions from some of the other products that are on the market. So could you just give us a little bit of an insight into why your product is so much more efficacious because it's so much stronger?
So yes, there are a lot of things that people have to think about with regards to light therapy. Dose, or like you say stronger, like the output, that's maybe less important, because actually you really only need a small amount of light to have a therapeutic effect. The turning the light off and on that I spoke about before, where you're kind of matching the brain waves, that's what you were referring to there. That's the frequency. And for better or for worse, we've named it according to like a Greek alphabet. So, alpha is just 10 hertz. It just means the light source is going on and off 10 times a second. Gamma is 40 hertz, slightly faster. So the brain, if you want to kind of be concentrating and focusing, that kind of fast-paced post frequency is very useful. So you're right, this device, it actually is quite low power output, but has variable frequencies that entrain the brain waves. Let me just show you this device.
Yeah, I was going to say, show us the headband and what.
Yeah, people can get an idea of how it's. So this one's out of battery, but this is the light here. So you can see this is similar in principle, but we've got the red and the near infrared. I'm just going to get one that's maybe a bit better charged. You can see this is lightweight, right?
Oh yeah, now we can see it for sure.
You can see, and this one goes on the back, because we have a little structure on the back of our brains there called the cerebellum, which is responsible not only for movement, which is important for movement disorders, but also emotionality.
Yes.
We spoke a little bit about how potentially you can change emotions.
Yes.
But you can see how simple this is, and it's light and easy. And also I'm avoiding the hair, because hair can be a bit of a barrier.
Yes.
To putting the light. And so it's very simple. Now, this is just a 10-minute session. I can pulse this light at, like you say, an alpha or a gamma frequency, depending on what I'm trying to do. But after 10 minutes, that's just one dose of light.
And how many doses should you do in a day?
You really need one.
Only one.
Only one a day, and really you don't need to do it every day, but it does need to be consistent. I equate it to how exercise works. If you go to the gym twice a week for 6 months, you're going to get a really good effect, and you're going to feel it. If you kind of just go every now and then, you're potentially not going to get the benefits. So you do need to be consistent with light.
Right.
It's a cumulative effect, exactly the same as exercise. You need to kind of build on your muscles. You need to build on your light receiver.
So if you're lying down, does that cerebellum device interfere with if you're doing your gut at the same time and you want to lay back on your...
No, you kind of just tuck it underneath the skull ridge right there. So by the time you're lying down, you can kind of avoid it. I know some people put a little pillow around. It's up to you. I don't. I find it's quite easy just to lay down, because it's kind of tucked. It's tucked just there on the back of your...
okay. And then you put the microbiome on your abdomen at the same time.
That's right.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Very, very simple. I think people also struggle that something so simple can have such a dramatic effect.
Exactly.
And it really doesn't have to be complicated. We're very, very deficient as a species in this red light, because we're not outside at the right times. The body responds very quickly if you just put those deficient wavelengths back.
So Cera, what other technology is exciting you at the moment that might represent some changes in what your current product looks like?
Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting things going on. I was at an event last week where they were kind of giving us the real, nitty gritty of new stuff coming out, mainly about the pulsed frequencies. So maybe looking at frequencies at different scales. I spoke to you about what happens if you pulse the light a number of times per second, but actually there are structures in the brain that are pulsing much faster than that. And there are structures like maybe the global brain is maybe potentially oscillating at a slower frequency. So potentially we can tweak those frequencies so that we are looking at a range of frequencies rather than just focusing on a hertz frequency. So that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And also ways of how we can measure what's going on so we can make it very specific for a person. So at the moment, I'm looking at technology that maybe monitors certain metrics in the body so that we can adjust the program. So you might want to use it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, depending on what you're doing, and you want to see how you're progressing. Because
Mm-hmm.
very simple measurement like heart rate variability, I don't know if you've known that.
Mm-hmm.
Just how variable your heart rate is determines how healthy your nervous system is. So, I mean, currently I measure it on a ring, people measure it on a watch.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially, we can integrate that kind of technology so that people can kind of watch what's happening with their nervous system while they're doing the therapy and adjust their therapy. And of course, AI is a massive buzzword, but if we could kind of collect all of the data and kind of have programs that are very specific for specific applications using AI to kind of make a more personal program, that is another next step in all of these wearable technologies is to monitor, to give a bespoke program and to kind of look for progress, because that's really what we're all about. We just want to help people to kind of get the results that get to whatever their health goal is.
And Cera, is this very subtle? I mean, when you put the 10-minute program on, do people report back to you that they feel a dramatic result, or is this something that happens over time and very subtly?
It's very subtle and happens over time. Although things like the gut, if you have something going on with your gut, people quite often get instant relief from that over 10 minutes.
Mm.
But no, I think, like I say, it's a bit like exercise. If you was to go to the gym today, you wouldn't come back and say, look at my huge muscles.
Right.
But if you did it every day for 6 months, well, then you might. It's a very similar principle. I think we kind of get a little bit impatient in this kind of therapeutic because we're used to a drug that has an instant result.
Right.
The body doesn't work like that. The body is all about incremental change towards a more positive outcome. So it does require a certain amount of consistency and bearing with the process. But I have a guy with motor neurons disease who over the course of 6 months had really amazing improvements of his symptoms. But that was with a very dedicated, doing it every day, making sure, that he didn't miss his session. And then, you get the result. So I think it's like any alternative therapy. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can have very, very amazing effects, if you just stick to a program.
And Dr. Patrick Porter with the brain tap has
Yeah.
been on, he's coming on a second time actually.
Right.
But how do you work with somebody like that? Because you're very compatible, synergistic, right? And so have you ever done any joint sessions with him, or is there any way that the two companies would work together?
I mean, I love Brain Tap. No, we haven't spoke though about a collaboration, but we also do have things in our own app where we have things like the sound files. So, for
Oh.
example, I spoke to you about the sound file where I said you could pulse the light at 40 hertz. Also,
Mhm.
within our app, we then have headphones that go on where you can listen to a 40 hertz frequency.
Oh.
So we're kind of doing a similar thing actually to some of what Patrick's doing in his device. He has a slightly different way of delivering light in that he's pulsing the light in the eyes.
Mhm.
That could be done at the same time, but I think my focus is on a lot more on the therapeutic side.
Mhm.
So also I have breath work in my app, I have meditations, I have hypnosis
Oh,
files.
I didn't realize that. Okay, so you're actually could be maybe even competitive rather than
It's maybe
synergistic.
a little bit, maybe a little
Okay.
bit, because I try to integrate, I'm trying to be as holistic as possible. So I want people to have a holistic experience. Red light therapy is great. If you combine it with sound, it's even better. If you combine it with breath work, it's even better. So in my app, over your 10-minute session, you get all of those things. So people actually, when they start to do it, they're not only introduced to photobiomodulation, neuromodulation, sound modulation. Also, how can you entrain your breath work to optimize a therapy?
Mm.
So it's kind of a complete program. I feel that's, over a fairly short time is going to get you to a better place.
Well, you know how important the diet and nutrition are, and you've spent some time studying, and obviously had a mother who influenced you. So, how do you integrate lifestyle choices with the product?
Yeah, we try to do a lot of education around leading a more outdoor lifestyle. I was
Mhm.
recently at a fabulous event called Back to Nature, where everybody there is on the same thing, where we're talking about things that we maybe need to be a little bit less comfortable, like doing things which may be extreme heat, sauna, extreme cold, ice baths, uh, like you say, taking care of your diet. And I don't advocate one particular diet. It's just the thing that I would say is kind of less sugar, less processed foods, natural, organic products. I'm not particularly pro vegetarian or pro carnivore, but I think there are some, very simple rules we can follow that are going to
Mhm.
be health giving, and community, and
A connection.
yeah, having fun, laughter, because I think sometimes, certainly if people are getting ill, they can start to become very serious. And actually, a lot of healing happens when you kind of are having fun, being with friends, having that community, having that connection. So a lot of people who come on and buy my system, we have support groups and we have different WhatsApp channels so people can share stories and realize, they're part of a bigger picture, and, you know, talk to people who are maybe in the same situations, because I think that's another thing that in this current society, maybe, it's a global society, it's very big, it's good, you and I can talk to each other, although actually we're not that far away today, but
Mhm.
usually we would be,
Right.
just to be able to have people that, are on your wavelength, or who can empathize with what you're going through. So
Hmm.
that's the kind of lifestyle thing that we try to nurture too. Just very simple outdoor life advice plus the community aspect.
And in the company, do you actually have medical people that guide those kinds of decisions so people make these lifestyle changes, that they're not just depending on the product to be miraculous without actually changing other bad habits that are going to affect the outcome of your product?
We do have a scientific advisory board that consists, we have people that have studied various specialisms. I do also have dedicated brain coaches if people want something that's, a bit more bespoke. As I mentioned, I do have a nutrition degree, I have a psychology degree.
I know.
We have quite a lot of expertise even within the company. Like I say, my clinical support advisor is now actually the guy that I was talking about with motor neuron. He's actually come on board with the team so that he can give his direct experience and knowledge. So
Mhm.
we try as much as possible to have that expertise within the
Mhm.
company. Yeah.
Yeah, because truly this is an integrated effort.
Yeah.
And, if anyone watches my podcast regularly, they know that, we talk about that consistently. And, you're interesting because a lot of the people that come on are going from pain to purpose to passion to power.
Yeah.
Those are my 4 Ps. And in your case, you didn't have one of those painful uh, aha moments in your life that said, okay, I got to make some changes. But I would say, this isn't a scientific answer, but or response, but I would say that at least 50% of the people that have been on my podcast have had something that occurred in their lives that, and I always say, opportunity and adversity and opportunity can be synonyms if it inspires you. In your case, it was just curiosity and obviously passion and interest, but without the pain part. So, well, we've come to unfortunately the end of our time together. I want to be sure that we mention your wonderful gift to our viewers. So, could you talk to us a little bit about what you would like to offer as an incentive to people to try your product?
For sure, yeah, we're going to give a discount code. So we're going to give a 20% discount, which I hope that will kind of encourage people to try the product, because, that's really the only way to kind of, we can talk for a long time, but direct experience is
Exactly.
So we're going to give a code that you can give to your listeners, which is ageless20 for a 20% discount. And they can just use that at the checkout. And there's no limit to the amount of time people can use that. And we'll keep that open.
That's lovely. And what is the website they should go to make that order?
So it's CeraThrive. So it's CERA Thrive, CeraThrive.com. My name's Sarah, so I'm Sarah at CeraThrive, info at CeraThrive. You can contact us through any of our socials, CeraThrive.
And
So,
your Sarah is the English SARAH, not
yes,
SARA, which is the Americanized
right.
form.
That's
So put sure people if you are going to email directly to Sarah
yes,
at CeraThrive, it's SARAH
that's
dot
right. Sarah,
CRA and then Thrive. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, I'm so happy that you were here in California and that you could make the
Yes.
adjustment in our timing today and all the information you've just provided. So I really encourage people to give your product a try. I never try to be commercial and sell anything, but when I believe in something,
Yes.
that this is the only product that I know of in the market that connects the brain and the gut. So that's in itself, I think, compelling.
Great.
Well, Sarah, you have a wonderful day, and thank you again for being with us.